The desert planet of Velor burned under 3 suns. Heat waves rose from the golden sand like ghosts dancing in the light. Sergeant Tejo wiped the sweat from his forehead and checked his rifle for the 100th time that day. He was a human. One of the few who served in the Velari Imperial Army. The Velari were a proud race. They stood taller than humans, with pale blue skin and silver eyes that glowed softly in the dark. They ruled over 40 star systems and believed themselves to be the greatest civilization in the galaxy. Tejo did not care about their pride. He cared about his paycheck. 5 years ago, he had left Earth with nothing but a bag of clothes and a dream of seeing the stars. Now he was a mercenary, fighting other people's wars for credits. It was not a noble life, but it kept him alive. Today, his job was simple. Protect the convoy. Get paid. Go home. The convoy was made of 6 large transport vehicles. They carried supplies for the Imperial Palace. Food, medicine, and expensive gifts from distant worlds. Tejo did not know what was inside each vehicle, and he did not ask. Asking questions was not part of his job. He sat in the back of the 3rd vehicle with 4 Velari soldiers. They looked at him with cold eyes. Humans were not welcome in the Velari Empire. They were seen as primitive creatures from a young planet, useful for labor and war, but nothing more. Tejo ignored their stares. He had learned to ignore many things in his life. The convoy moved slowly through a narrow canyon. Red rocks rose high on both sides, blocking the view of the sky. Tejo felt something cold in his stomach. This place was perfect for an ambush. He was right. The first explosion came without warning. The lead vehicle flew into the air and crashed on its side. Fire and smoke filled the canyon. Tejo grabbed his rifle and jumped out of the transport before the second explosion hit. Raiders. Dozens of them. They came from the rocks above, firing down at the convoy with energy weapons. Their faces were hidden behind metal masks, and their bodies were covered in black armor. The Velari soldiers tried to fight back, but they were not ready. 3 of them fell in the first few seconds. The 4th one hid behind a rock, shaking with fear. Tejo moved fast. He had been in many battles before. His body knew what to do even when his mind was still catching up. He ran to the nearest rock and took cover. Then he looked up and started shooting. 1 raider fell. Then another. Then a 3rd. The raiders were not expecting a human to fight so well. They had planned to kill the Velari soldiers quickly and take the supplies. But Tejo was not like the Velari. He did not freeze under pressure. He did not wait for orders. He just acted. He ran from rock to rock, moving closer to the center of the convoy. The 6th vehicle was the largest. It had extra guards around it before the attack. Now those guards were all dead. Tejo wondered what was inside that vehicle. It must be something important. A raider jumped down from the rocks and landed in front of him. Tejo did not hesitate. He hit the raider with the back of his rifle and knocked him to the ground. Then he kept moving. When he reached the 6th vehicle, he heard a scream. It was a woman's voice, high and frightened. Tejo kicked open the back door and found 2 raiders inside. They were trying to drag someone out of the vehicle. The someone was a young Velari woman. She wore white silk clothes and had long silver hair. Her eyes were wide with terror. Around her neck hung a golden symbol that Tejo recognized. It was the mark of the imperial family. This woman was royalty. Tejo raised his rifle and shot the first raider in the chest. The second raider turned and fired at him, but Tejo was already moving. He dove to the side, rolled on the ground, and came up shooting. The second raider fell. The young woman stared at him. Her lips were trembling. Tears ran down her blue cheeks. Tejo held out his hand. "Come with me, now." She did not move. She was too scared. Tejo heard more raiders coming. He did not have time to be gentle. He grabbed her arm and pulled her out of the vehicle. She stumbled and almost fell, but he caught her and kept her moving. They ran through the smoke and fire. Raiders shot at them from all directions. Tejo fired back with one hand while holding the woman with the other. A shot hit his shoulder, but he did not stop. Pain was just another thing he had learned to ignore. They reached a small cave in the canyon wall. Tejo pushed the woman inside and stood at the entrance with his rifle ready. 3 raiders came running toward them. Tejo shot all 3 before they could get close. For the next 10 minutes, he held that position. Alone. Wounded. Protecting a woman he did not know. Finally, the sound of engines filled the air. Imperial reinforcements had arrived. Large warships flew over the canyon and opened fire on the remaining raiders. The battle was over in seconds. Tejo lowered his rifle and sat down on the ground. Blood ran down his arm from his shoulder wound. He was tired. So very tired. The young woman came out of the cave and knelt beside him. Up close, she was beautiful. Her silver eyes were like moons in a clear night sky. Her skin was smooth and perfect. She looked at his wound with a worried expression. "You saved my life," she said. Her voice was soft and musical. Tejo shrugged with his good shoulder. "Just doing my job." "No. You did more than your job. The others ran. You stayed." She touched his wounded shoulder gently. "What is your name?" "Human? Tejo. Sergeant Tejo. I am Princess Yuna, daughter of Emperor Haywan." She looked into his eyes with something like wonder. "You will be rewarded for this, Sergeant Tejo. My father will want to thank you personally." Tejo almost laughed. A reward from the Emperor? He would probably get a few extra credits and a pat on the back. Maybe a medal if he was lucky. That was how the galaxy worked. Heroes did not get great rewards. They got small thank yous, and then everyone forgot about them. "That's not necessary, Princess. I was just doing what I was paid to do." Yuna shook her head slowly. "You do not understand, Sergeant. In the Valari Empire, saving a member of the royal family is the greatest honor a soldier can achieve. My father will not forget this. He cannot forget this." Before Tejo could respond, a group of Imperial soldiers surrounded them. Their commander, a tall Valari with many medals on his chest, looked down at Tejo with surprise. "A human? A human saved the princess?" "Yes," Yuna said firmly. "This human saved my life, alone, while your soldiers ran and hid." The commander's face turned darker blue with shame. He bowed his head. "The Emperor will hear of this. You will come to the Imperial Palace, human. You will receive your reward." Tejo stood up slowly, wincing from the pain in his shoulder. A trip to the Imperial Palace? A reward from the Emperor himself? He had a feeling his simple life was about to become very complicated. The Imperial Palace was the largest building Tejo had ever seen. It rose from the center of the capital city like a mountain made of white crystal. Thousands of towers reached toward the sky, each one decorated with gold and precious stones. Waterfalls fell from floating platforms, and gardens hung from balconies hundreds of meters above the ground. Tejo stood at the main gate and felt very small. He had spent 3 days in a military hospital, getting his shoulder wound treated. Valari medicine was advanced. The doctors had healed his injury completely in just 1 day. But they had kept him for 2 more days for observation. Tejo suspected they were really keeping him there to make sure he did not run away. Now he was here, at the palace, wearing a clean uniform that the military had given him. His old clothes had been too dirty and torn to wear in front of the Emperor. A palace servant approached him. The servant was a young Valari male with nervous eyes. "Sergeant Tejo, please follow me. The Emperor is waiting." Tejo nodded and walked behind the servant. They passed through the main gate and entered a long hallway. The floor was made of polished stone that reflected their images like a mirror. The walls were covered with paintings of past emperors and great battles. Everything was designed to make visitors feel small and unimportant. It was working. They walked for what felt like hours. The palace was like a maze. Tejo tried to remember the turns they took, but there were too many. Left, right, up a staircase, through a garden, across a bridge. He would never find his way out alone. Finally, they reached a pair of enormous doors. 2 guards stood on each side, wearing golden armor and holding energy spears. They looked at Tejo with cold expressions but said nothing. The servant bowed. "Wait here, please. I will announce your arrival." He disappeared through the doors. Tejo stood alone with the guards. None of them spoke. The silence was uncomfortable. A few minutes later, the doors opened again. The servant came out and bowed. "The Emperor will see you now." Tejo took a deep breath and walked through the doors. The throne room was massive. The ceiling was so high that Tejo could barely see it. Pillars of white stone lined the sides, each one carved with images of stars and planets. At the far end of the room, on a raised platform, sat the Emperor. Emperor Haewon was old. His blue skin had faded to a pale gray, and his silver eyes had lost some of their glow. But he still looked powerful. He sat straight on his golden throne, wearing robes of deep purple. A crown of silver and diamonds rested on his head. Around him stood dozens of nobles and advisors. They wore expensive clothes and carried themselves with pride. They all turned to look at Tejo as he walked toward the throne. A human. In the throne room, some of them whispered to each other. Others looked disgusted. A few seemed curious. Tejo ignored them all. He had learned to ignore many things. He stopped at the bottom of the platform and bowed. He did not know the proper way to greet a Valari emperor, so he just bowed the way humans did. It probably looked wrong, but it was the best he could do. "Rise," the emperor said. His voice was deep and strong. Despite his age, Tejo stood up and looked at the emperor. Their eyes met for a moment. Tejo saw something in those silver eyes, something calculating, something dangerous. "So you are the human who saved my daughter?" "Yes, Your Majesty." "Tell me what happened, in your own words," Tejo told him. He kept the story simple and short. The ambush, the raiders, the fighting, finding the princess in the 6th vehicle, protecting her until help arrived. He did not make himself sound like a hero. He just told the truth. When he finished, the emperor nodded slowly. "The reports I received say the same thing. You killed 17 raiders by yourself. You took a wound to your shoulder but continued fighting. You held your position alone for 10 minutes against superior numbers." The emperor leaned forward slightly. "Why?" Tejo was confused by the question. "Why what, Your Majesty? Why did you fight so hard?" The other soldiers ran. They valued their lives more than their duty. But you stayed. You protected my daughter, even though you did not know who she was. Why? Tejo thought about it. The honest answer was that he did not know. He had not thought about it at the time. He had just acted. "I suppose, because it was the right thing to do, Your Majesty. Someone needed help. I could help. So I did." The nobles whispered again. Some of them laughed quietly. A human talking about doing the right thing? How amusing. But the emperor did not laugh. He stared at Tejo for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "The right thing," he repeated softly. He sat back on his throne and raised his hand. A servant came forward with a small box. "You saved the life of an imperial princess. By our law, you must be rewarded. Do you know what reward is given to those who save a member of the royal family?" Tejo shook his head. "No, Your Majesty. I expect it will be credits or perhaps a promotion." The emperor smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who knew a secret that no one else knew. "Credits? A promotion? No, Sergeant Tejo. The reward for saving an imperial life is much greater than that." He waved his hand, and a side door opened. Princess Yuna walked into the throne room. She wore a beautiful dress of white and silver. Her long hair was arranged in an elegant style, decorated with small jewels. She looked even more beautiful than she had in the canyon, but she also looked nervous. She walked slowly toward the platform, keeping her eyes on the ground. Tejo did not understand what was happening. The emperor stood from his throne. His voice echoed through the great hall. "By ancient law, the one who saves an imperial life is bound to that life forever. It is the highest honor our empire can give. It is a bond that cannot be broken." Tejo felt cold. He did not like where this was going. "Sergeant Tejo of Earth, for your bravery and sacrifice, I grant you the greatest reward the Valari Empire can offer." The emperor paused and looked at his daughter. I grant you the hand of Princess Yuna in marriage. You will become part of the imperial family. You will be her husband and protector for all the days of your life. The throne room exploded with noise. Nobles shouted in shock. Advisors protested. Someone screamed that this was an insult to the empire, but Taeho heard none of it. He was frozen in place, staring at the emperor with wide eyes. Marriage? To the princess? This had to be a mistake. A translation error. Something. He looked at Princess Yuna. She had raised her head now, and her eyes met his. She looked just as shocked as he felt. Her lips were slightly open, and her hands were shaking. This was not a joke. This was not a mistake. The emperor had just given him a princess as a reward. Taeho's simple life had just become very, very complicated. The throne room had turned into chaos. Nobles were shouting at each other. Advisors were rushing to the emperor with worried faces. Guards stood nervously at their positions. Unsure of what to do, Taeho still had not moved. He stood at the bottom of the platform, his mind racing with thoughts that made no sense. Marriage? To an alien princess? He was just a soldier. A mercenary. He had no family, no wealth, no status. How could he marry royalty? Your Majesty. A tall noble stepped forward. His face was red with anger. This cannot be allowed. A human cannot marry into the imperial family. It goes against everything we stand for. Lord Donghae, the emperor said calmly. Are you saying that I, your emperor, have made a wrong decision? The noble called Donghae hesitated. Challenging the emperor directly was dangerous, but he was too angry to stop. The ancient law was written for Velari heroes, Your Majesty. Not for primitive species from backward planets. Surely there is another way to reward this human. Other nobles nodded and voiced their agreement. The room filled with angry murmurs. Taeho finally found his voice. Your Majesty, I agree with them. Everyone went silent. The nobles stared at him with surprise. Even the emperor raised an eyebrow. You agree? The emperor asked. Yes, Your Majesty. I did not save the princess for a reward. I certainly did not save her to gain a wife. I am not suited for royal life. I am a soldier. I belong on battlefields, not in palaces. Taeho bowed his head. Please, give me credits or a medal. That will be enough. I do not want this honor. A strange expression crossed the emperor's face. Was it respect? Or was it amusement? Taeho could not tell. Before the emperor could respond, Princess Yuna stepped forward. Her voice was stronger than Taeho expected. Father, I must also object. The nobles gasped. A princess speaking against the emperor in public? This was unheard of. You have always said that I could choose my own husband, Yuna continued. You promised me this when I was young. Have you forgotten your promise? The emperor's expression hardened. I made that promise when I thought you would choose wisely. But you are 30 years old, Yuna. You have rejected every suitor I have brought to you. Princes from powerful families. Generals who won great wars. Scholars with brilliant minds. You refused them all, because I did not love any of them. Love? The emperor laughed coldly. Love is a luxury that royalty cannot afford. Marriages are made for alliances. For power. For the good of the empire. Then why give me to a human with no power and no alliance to offer? The room went quiet again. It was a good question. If the emperor wanted a political marriage, why choose a simple human soldier? The emperor stood from his throne and walked down the steps slowly. He stopped in front of Taeho and looked at him with those calculating silver eyes. Let me tell you something, Sergeant Taeho. Something that these nobles do not understand. He gestured at the crowd around them. These people think that power comes from wealth and status. They think that strong families make strong empires. But they are wrong. He began to walk in a circle around Taeho, like a predator studying its prey. I have watched my daughter reject husband after husband. Do you know why she rejected them? Because they were weak. Oh, they had money and titles. They had armies and lands, but inside, they were weak. They would run from danger. They would sacrifice others to save themselves. They were not worthy of my daughter. He stopped in front of Tejo again. But you, Sergeant Tejo, you did not run. When everyone else fled, you stayed and fought. You were wounded, but you kept fighting. You protected a woman you did not know, expecting nothing in return. The Emperor smiled thinly. That is true strength. That is what my daughter needs. Tejo shook his head. With respect, Your Majesty, I am not a hero. I have done many things I am not proud of. I have killed people for money. I have fought in wars I did not believe in. I am not the noble person you think I am. I did not say you were noble. I said you were strong. There is a difference. The Emperor turned to his daughter. And as for you, Yuna, you wanted to choose your own husband? Very well. You can still choose. You can accept this marriage, or you can refuse it. Hope appeared in Yuna's eyes. And if I refuse, then you will be removed from the line of succession. You will lose your title, your wealth, and your place in this palace. You will live as a common citizen for the rest of your life. The hope in Yuna's eyes died. Her face went pale. Father, you cannot mean that. I am the Emperor. I can mean whatever I wish. He walked back up to his throne and sat down. The choice is yours, daughter. Marry the human who saved your life, or give up everything you have ever known. You have 3 days to decide. He waved his hand dismissively. This audience is over. Clear the room. Guards moved forward and began pushing the nobles toward the doors. Tejo did not resist. He let himself be guided out of the throne room, his mind still struggling to process what had happened. Outside, in the hallway, he found Princess Yuna waiting for him. She had tears in her eyes. I am sorry, she said quietly. I did not know my father would do this. I did not ask for this. Neither did I, Tejo replied. They stood in silence for a moment. Two strangers whose lives had suddenly become tied together by an ancient law and an emperor's command. What will you do? Tejo asked. Yuna wiped her tears with the back of her hand. I do not know. I cannot give up my title. My position is the only power I have. Without it, I am nothing. You could still refuse. Start a new life somewhere else. She laughed bitterly. You do not understand, Sergeant. I have never lived outside this palace. I do not know how to cook or clean or take care of myself. I would not survive a month as a common citizen. Tejo did not know what to say. He had spent his whole life taking care of himself. He could not imagine depending on others for everything. There is another problem, Yuna continued. Lord Donghae and the other nobles will not accept this marriage. They will try to stop it. They may try to hurt you. Let them try, Tejo said without thinking. Yuna looked at him with surprise. Then, slowly, a small smile appeared on her face. You really are not afraid, are you? I have been in many dangerous situations, Princess. Angry nobles are not the worst thing I have faced. She studied his face for a moment. Her silver eyes were thoughtful. Perhaps my father was right about one thing. You are different from the others. She took a deep breath. I need time to think. But I want you to know something, Sergeant Tejo. Whatever I decide, it will not be because of you. You saved my life. I will not blame you for my father's actions. She turned and walked away, her white dress flowing behind her like a cloud. Tejo watched her go. 3 days. He had 3 days to figure out how his life had gone, from simple to impossible. He had wanted to see the stars. He had wanted adventure, but he had never wanted this. A princess, a marriage, a place in the imperial family. What had he gotten himself into? 3 days passed quickly. On the morning of the 3rd day, Princess Yuna announced her decision. She would marry the human soldier. The palace exploded with gossip. Servants whispered in the hallways. Nobles complained in their private chambers. Everyone had an opinion, and none of those opinions were good. Taeho was moved from the military barracks to a room in the royal wing of the palace. It was the largest room he had ever slept in. The bed could fit 10 people. The bathroom was bigger than his old apartment on Earth. Everything was made of expensive materials that he could not name. He hated it. The room was cold and empty. It had no personality. It was a box designed to impress visitors, not a place where someone actually lived. Taeho missed his small room in the barracks. At least that room had felt like his own. On his first night in the palace, someone tried to kill him. He was sleeping when he heard the door open. His soldier instincts woke him immediately. He rolled off the bed just as a knife stabbed into the pillow where his head had been. The attacker was dressed in black. Taeho could not see their face in the darkness. He grabbed the lamp from the bedside table and threw it at the attacker. The attacker dodged, but the distraction gave Taeho enough time to get to his feet. They fought in the darkness. The attacker was skilled with the knife, but Taeho was skilled with his fists. He blocked a slash, grabbed the attacker's arm, and twisted hard. The knife fell to the floor. A knee to the stomach, an elbow to the face, and the attacker went down. Taeho turned on the lights and looked at his enemy. It was a young Valari male wearing servant clothes. His nose was bleeding, and his arm was bent at an unnatural angle. "Who sent you?" Taeho demanded. The servant spat blood on the floor. "You do not belong here, human. You will never belong here." Guards arrived a few minutes later. They took the servant away for questioning. A captain apologized to Taeho and promised that security would be improved. Taeho did not sleep again that night. The next morning, he met Princess Yuna in the garden. She was sitting on a stone bench, looking at the flowers. Her face was tired. She had dark circles under her eyes. "I heard about the attack," she said. "Are you hurt?" "No. The attacker was not very skilled." Yuna sighed. "It will not be the last attempt. Lord Donghae and his allies are determined to stop this marriage. They see you as an insult to our entire civilization. Do you see me that way?" The question hung in the air. Yuna did not answer immediately. She kept looking at the flowers, her expression thoughtful. "I do not know what I see," she finally admitted. "I have been raised to believe that humans are inferior, that your species is young and primitive and has nothing to offer the galaxy. But you saved my life. You fight better than any Valari soldier I have seen. You faced my father without fear." She turned to look at him. "You are not what I expected. Neither are you," Taeho replied. "I expected a spoiled princess who cried and complained. But you stood up to the emperor in front of everyone. That takes courage." A small smile appeared on her face. It disappeared quickly. "We are being moved to shared quarters today," she said. "It is tradition for engaged couples to live together before the wedding, to make sure they can tolerate each other." Taeho frowned. "Shared quarters? You mean we have to live in the same room? The same wing? We will have separate bedrooms, but we will share common areas. The kitchen, the living room, the balcony." She paused. "I am not happy about it either, but we have no choice." The new quarters were even more luxurious than Taeho's previous room. They were actually a small house inside the palace, with multiple rooms connected by hallways. Everything was decorated in white and gold. Large windows showed a beautiful view of the capital city. Yuna's servants moved her belongings into the master bedroom. Taeho took the smaller guest room. It was still bigger than anywhere he had lived before. The first few days were awkward. They avoided each other as much as possible. Taeho spent his time exercising in the small training room. Yuna spent her time in her bedroom, doing whatever princesses did. They only met during meals, and even then, they barely spoke. One evening, Taeho came out of the training room and found Yuna in the living area. She was sitting on the floor, surrounded by papers and books. Her hair was messy, and she had ink stains on her fingers. "What are you doing?" he asked. She looked up with annoyance. "Working. I have responsibilities, you know. Trade agreements to review, diplomatic letters to write. Just because I am being forced into marriage does not mean I can ignore my duties." Taeho was surprised. I did not know you did actual work. Of course you did not. You assumed I was a spoiled princess who did nothing but look pretty. Her voice was cold. Is that not what you expected? I apologized for that already. No, you did not. Taeho thought back. She was right. He had compared her favorably to his expectations, but he had never actually apologized for having those expectations in the first place. Then I apologize now. I was wrong to judge you before I knew you. Yuna stared at him for a moment. Then she looked back at her papers. Apology accepted. Now leave me alone. I have work to do. It was not a warm response, but it was progress. The following days brought more attempts on Taeho's life. Someone poisoned his food. He noticed the strange smell and did not eat it. Someone cut the railing on his balcony. He noticed it was loose and did not lean on it. Someone hired assassins to break into the quarters at night. Taeho heard them coming and beat them unconscious before they could reach Yuna's bedroom. After the third assassination attempt, Yuna came to his room. You saved me again, she said. Those assassins were coming for both of us. If you had not stopped them, I was doing my job. You do not have a job anymore. You are not a soldier. You are my future husband. She sat down on a chair and rubbed her temples. This is exhausting. Every day, I have to wonder if today is the day someone finally succeeds in killing one of us. Then help me find out who is behind it. Yuna looked up. What? The attacks are organized. Someone is paying for these assassins. Someone with money and power. If we find out who it is, we can stop them. You want me to investigate the nobles? That is dangerous. If they find out, are you afraid? The question was a challenge. Yuna recognized it. Her silver eyes narrowed. I am afraid of many things, Sergeant Taeho. But I am not afraid of nobles who hide in the shadows and send others to do their dirty work. She stood up. Very well. Let us investigate together. I know the palace. I know the politics. I know who hates who and why. But I will need your help to act on what we find. You have it. For the first time since the Emperor's announcement, they looked at each other, not as strangers forced together, but as partners working toward a common goal. It was not love. It was not even friendship. But it was a start. The investigation took 3 weeks. Yuna used her knowledge of palace politics to identify suspects. Taeho used his soldier skills to gather evidence. They worked together every night, spreading papers across the living room floor and connecting the pieces of a dangerous puzzle. Lord Donghae was the obvious suspect. But he was not the only one. They found evidence that 7 noble families had formed a secret alliance against the marriage. They had pooled their money to hire assassins. They had bribed servants to spy on Taeho and Yuna. They had even contacted foreign governments to build pressure against the Emperor. This is bigger than I thought, Yuna said one night. If we expose them, it could cause a political crisis. What is the alternative? Wait for them to kill us? Yuna shook her head. No, but we need to be smart about this. We cannot just accuse powerful nobles without solid proof. We need something they cannot deny. They found it a week later. One of Lord Donghae's servants was caught trying to poison the palace water supply. Under questioning, the servant revealed everything. Names, dates, meeting places, the entire conspiracy. The Emperor acted swiftly. Lord Donghae and his allies were arrested. Their properties were seized. Their families were stripped of their titles. It was the biggest political scandal in decades. But what surprised everyone was how the evidence had been gathered. The Emperor himself announced that Princess Yuna and her future husband had worked together to uncover the conspiracy. They had saved not just themselves, but possibly the entire palace. For the first time, people began to look at Taeho differently. He was no longer just a human. He was the human who had exposed traitors. The human who had protected the princess twice. The human who had proven his worth in ways that noble birth could not match. The wedding was held 1 month later. It was the largest ceremony the capital had seen in generations. Millions of people watched from the streets as the princess walked to the great temple. Billions more watched through screens across the empire. Taeho wore a formal suit designed by the palace tailors. It was white and gold, matching Valari traditions. He felt ridiculous in it. But Yuna had assured him he looked acceptable. Yuna wore a dress made of starlight. At least, that was what it looked like. The fabric shifted and glowed with every step she took, creating patterns that resembled galaxies and nebulas. Her hair was decorated with flowers made of silver. She was the most beautiful thing Taeho had ever seen. They stood together at the altar and exchanged vows. The words were traditional Valari phrases that Taeho had memorized over the past month. He said them carefully, hoping he did not make any pronunciation mistakes. When the ceremony ended, Yuna took his hand. Her fingers were cool against his skin. "We are married now," she said quietly. "How do you feel?" "Strange," Taeho admitted. "I never thought I would get married, especially not to royalty. I never thought I would marry someone who did not care about my title." She smiled slightly. "You still do not care about it, do you?" "No, I care about you. The title is just decoration." It was perhaps the most honest thing he had ever said to her. Yuna's eyes widened. Then she looked away, her cheeks turning a darker shade of blue. "You should not say such things in public. People will think you are being too emotional." "I do not care what people think. I know. It is one of the things I like about you." That night, they returned to their quarters as husband and wife. The servants had decorated everything with flowers and candles. A meal was waiting for them, but neither of them was hungry. They sat on the balcony and watched the city lights below. Fireworks exploded in the sky, celebrating the royal wedding. Colors of blue and gold and silver painted the darkness. "Can I ask you something?" Yuna said. "Yes. Do you regret it? Any of it?" Taeho thought about the question. He thought about his life before the ambush. The loneliness. The emptiness. The feeling that he was just waiting for something but did not know what. "No," he said. "I do not regret it. Even though you were forced into this? We were both forced. But somewhere along the way, I stopped thinking about it as being forced." He looked at her. "I chose this. I chose you." Yuna was quiet for a long moment. Then she moved closer to him and rested her head on his shoulder. "I chose you too," she whispered. They sat like that for a long time, watching the fireworks and the stars. Two people from different worlds, brought together by chance and bound together by law, but staying together by choice. In the weeks that followed, life became something new. Taeho learned the ways of the palace. He attended meetings with Yuna and learned about politics and diplomacy. He trained with the royal guards and earned their respect through skill and hard work. Yuna learned things too. She learned about Earth and human culture. She learned that humans were not primitive, just different. She learned that Taeho's strength came not from his muscles, but from his will to never give up. The nobles who had once hated Taeho began to change their opinions. Not all of them, but some. They saw how he treated the princess with respect. They saw how he listened to her opinions and valued her mind. They saw that the marriage was not a joke or an insult, but something real. One day, the emperor summoned them to the throne room. He looked older than before, tired from the stress of the conspiracy and its aftermath. "I brought you two together for political reasons," he admitted. "I wanted to send a message that the Valari Empire would accept anyone who proved their worth, regardless of where they came from. That merit mattered more than birth." He looked at Taeho. "But I also did it because I saw something in you, Sergeant. Something that my daughter needed. Someone who would stand beside her no matter what. Someone who would protect her not because of duty, but because of who she is." "I would die for her," Taeho said simply. "But more importantly, I would live for her." The emperor smiled. It was the first genuine smile Taeho had ever seen on his face. "Yes, that is exactly what I hoped you would say." He stood from his throne and walked down the steps. He stopped in front of Taeho and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Welcome to the family, son." That night, Taeho and Yuna walked through the palace gardens under the light of 3 moons. The flowers glowed softly in the darkness, and the air smelled sweet. "Do you remember what you said to me in the canyon?" Yuna asked. "When I asked why you saved me? I said it was the right thing to do." "Yes, She stopped walking and turned to face him. You did not know who I was. You did not expect a reward. You just did what was right. Because it was right. She reached up and touched his face gently. That is why I love you, Taeho. Not because you are strong, or brave, or skilled, but because you have a good heart. A truly good heart. Taeho pulled her close and held her. He had traveled across the galaxy looking for purpose. He had fought in wars and survived dangers that should have killed him many times. But here, in the arms of an alien princess under strange moons, he had finally found what he was looking for. Home, not a place, a person. He had expected a modest reward. A few credits. A medal. A pat on the back. Instead, he had found something worth more than all the wealth in the galaxy. He had found love.